kind of get the show on the road, and then I want to welcome everybody to the Utility Advisory Board meeting. Patrick, why don't you just kind of kick it off and announce today's date and what we're doing tonight as a work session.
Very good. So welcome everybody to this August 17th meeting / workshop of the Utility Advisory Board. And can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay, very good. And so welcome everyone, and we're going to start with a roll call.
Stafford.
Here.
Toom. Toom.
Here.
Swanson.
Here.
Lister.
Here.
Is that me, Lene?
No, sorry, it was Robert Lillo. He's our new member. Morrison, is up to you next.
I'm here.
Charles Mangold.
Here. Here.
Thank you.
Yep.
All right, we are going to jump right into the presentations then. It starts off with the FERC Hydro Re-licensing update.
Tonight we have Leslie Brodkowski here from TRC. Leslie's been kind enough to put together a little slide presentation to get everybody up to speed of where we're at with hydroelectric re-licensing in the middle of our busiest season. Talk about what's been done, what has to be done, and also budgeting. So Leslie, the floor is yours. You can share your screen. Take it away.
All right, thank you, Kevin. I'm hitting share, so let me know when you can see my screen here.
That looks really good.
All right, full screen. All right, well, thank you everybody for having me here to give you an update. So I'm here to talk tonight about the FERC process for the 2 hydros that you have in River Falls. Quick overview of our agenda. We're going to do a brief overview of the FERC schedule, it's a long process, just to go over where we are in the process. Talk about the U.S. Army Corps of Engineer Planning Assistance for States, the PASS program involvement in this process. Do an overview of the studies, updates on each specific study, update on budget, overview of next steps, and then also we'll have some time at the end for any questions and discussion. So here's a truncated version of the FERC schedule. So as you all know, the FERC relicensing process is a 5.5, 6 year long process. So I've kind of condensed a few things and hit some of the high points. So we kicked this off by submitting the notice of intent and the pre-application document back in August of 2018. And since then, we've been going through some scoping, figuring out what studies need to be conducted, going back and forth, working with FERC agencies and different stakeholders. That happened between 2018, 2019. The first study season was last year, 2019, and it's based on the schedule that happened to fall in July of 2019 through October. Following last year's studies, we did put together an initial study report, had meetings with stakeholders, agencies, and tribal representatives requesting feedback and comments, and kicked off our second study season here in May of 2020. And next in the process will be, once we finish this season, to do an updated study report, have another meeting where agencies and stakeholders can provide input and also comments. And then our draft license application is slated to go out to agencies and stakeholders for review and comment in April of 2021, and comments by next July, and filing the final license application in August of 2021. And within this process, as you all know, we're kind of lumping together the relicensing of the Junction Falls facility and the proposed action of decommissioning with dam removal of Powell Falls. So that's all fitting under this FERC schedule. So as we all know, right now we're in the second study season, so that's what we're going to focus our discussion on tonight. And within this, I wanted to put this slide up front because they've been playing a large role in the studies. So the Army Corps of Engineers has what's called the Planning Assistance to States, or the PAST program. And what this is, it's a cost share program that assists with comprehensive plan development. And City of River Falls, or River Falls Municipal Utilities rather, did submit an application and was approved by the program last December. And long story short, essentially what this program is doing is providing support for some of the studies. So it's a cost share program where some of the studies are able to be conducted by the Corps of Engineer staff and or their contractors. And that's helping to take away some of the costs, the direct cost to the municipality for the studies that need to be conducted under the process. And here's an overview of the studies, all the studies that were conducted in 2019 and 2020. So there were a handful of studies that were conducted just last year that are already completed. There's a handful of studies that need to be conducted just this year, and then there's some that were 2-year-long studies. So the water quality in particular, and also the decommissioning plan. Those are both bigger efforts that are taking place over both years. So I just wanted to go through each study that's taking place. The first study is more of a desktop study, really, and this is being conducted by the Army Corps of Engineers staff in-house. So they're working on pulling together the information for this study. So this is one that's able to be conducted under that cost sharing program. Water quality study, again, was conducted both 2019 and 2020. And yeah, the FERC process, I think, in some ways is long enough and hard enough as it is. But kudos to you guys. You've survived both a pandemic and flood of record for trying to get studies done. So anything, you know, hopefully anything, right? Knock on wood, that could get thrown at you guys has. And, you know, so far the studies are progressing. They're chugging along. They're doing just fine. So with it, you know, in 2020, the flood did wash away the data sondes that were out in the waterway. So probably floating somewhere, I don't know, down the Mississippi or in the Gulf of Mexico by now, but they were replaced and they're out there collecting data right now. The Lake George Shoreline Habitat Assessment is being conducted this year. And this is being conducted by an Army Corps of Engineer contractor. And this one was delayed slightly because of the flood. They were planning on doing this assessment actually, I think during the week of July 4th. So right after the flood came through. So we did call them up right away and let them know that we needed to postpone the field work, but it was conducted in July, which is the target month for looking at aquatic invasive species and other things that would be looking at along the shoreline, looking at overall abundance of vegetation. The aquatic invasive species survey, kind of the same story for this one, conducted under by a contractor from the Army Corps of Engineers. And it was delayed again, slightly based on the timing of the flood, but it was conducted, this one in mid-July. So it was an appropriate time for the study to still be conducted. The mussel survey was conducted this year in 2020, and this one was conducted by the National Park Service, St. Croix National Scenic Riverway, and the Army Corps of Engineers dive crew. So some really specialized folks went out and conducted this study for us and did a nice job. So, and with this one, the field work has been completed. As of last week, they were able to complete all the field work. And this one, much more so than flooding, COVID actually had an impact on the schedule on this one. Just one, getting all the approvals that they needed to get the dive crew out there. And then also just, I think, some testing of staff in the field and concerns of potential with the virus that turned out to be negative. But anyway, long story short, they got the work done and were able to find some mussels. No mussels were found in the Kinnickinnic River itself, but the St. Croix River, which is known to be one of the hot spots for mussels and in all of the Midwest, certainly did have mussels in the survey. The Wetland, Riparian, and Terrestrial Resources Survey was conducted last year. That one's completed, and the results for that survey were in the initial study report that was distributed in January of 2020. Riverine habitat evaluation below Powell Falls. We completed the desktop portion of this study in 2019, and then due to high water levels last year, delayed the fieldwork portion until this year. And this study is most likely going to be conducted by an Army Corps contractor, and that specific contract is still under negotiation, but this is the last contract that's still, the Corps is still kind of trying to work through exactly who's going to be doing it and for what price. And that's just part of the process that they go through for helping us out with studies. The recreation study was broke into 2 years. So in 2019, we did the recreation facility inventory. And with that, basically, we were going out and documenting and mapping all the different recreational resources and facilities that are out. So things like benches and trails, fishing areas, different access areas, those were all documented. And then this year, we're doing the recreation use assessment. And this is being done by an Army Corps of Engineer contractor, again, trying to take as much advantage as we can to that cost share match program. And with this one was postponed due to concerns with COVID-19. It was supposed to start on Memorial Day weekend and ended up getting delayed until June instead of end of May, just because it was kind of right when everything was going on. You know, and this study does involve someone out there essentially with a clipboard asking questions, saying, hey, how are you doing? Why are you here today? How many people are in your party recreating in the area? So due to concern, to be respectful of people's distance and just everything going on with the pandemic, we did postpone that a little bit. So they are still going out and collecting those surveys and doing point counts while they're out on the site. And the field work for that project will wrap up in September. For cultural resources, again, there's 2 prongs to this one. The architectural survey is really looking at historic buildings in the area, specific to the FERC project boundary. And this one was conducted in 2019 by TRC. And the results of this were included in the initial study report back in January. And the archaeological survey was just conducted just this month, I think in August. So also conducted by TRC. And this is one that originally we were going to have a past program, Army Corps of Engineers contractor do this one, but the budget estimates they were getting were twice as high as other estimates that we had gotten before we had started that program. So we actually, to help balance out the budget, decided to bring that one back under River Falls Municipal Utilities, and they contracted that study out directly for less cost. The decommissioning plan is a 2-year effort. So the draft plan went out with the initial study report in January, and we're continuing to work through the plan. Ayers Associates is really taking the lead on this one. TRC, the company I'm with, is also helping to support it, specifically more to the restoration planning side of things. And we are working with different partnership and agency groups on this one pretty closely. We just provided a quarterly update to the Canyon Corridor Collaborative and to the DNR, requesting some comments on status and some of the ideas that we talked about. Also with the 2020, some of the site conditions have changed out there certainly, and we're still waiting on a dam safety response from FERC. Kevin's been in contact with the dam safety folks, so depending on what kind of information and requirements that we get from that group will kind of determine some of the next steps and some of the direction that we go with the decommissioning plan.
Yeah, I'll just chime in on that real quick, Leslie. So I talked to FERC, the FERC dam safety people about 2.5 weeks ago, and I thought I would have the response back to our conditions report by now, so I could report back to you what they would like us to do, though I have not officially seen their report. I did get a verbal on the phone that they may want us to draw down the lower lake to analyze any damage to that dam in the abutment. So anyway, we're waiting to hear. And like Leslie said, a lot of this decommissioning plan may hinge on what they order us to do. So we'll see. Waiting.
Yeah, and we'll continue to, work with FERC and agency stakeholders on this and, continue to watch conditions and proceed as we need to on this one. And then there was one new study that was required by FERC in May of 2020. So this is one that you haven't probably heard about before unless Kevin gave you an update on it earlier. So this one is a sediment study, and FERC requested this just based on some of the information or some of the questions I think they had based on the initial decommissioning plan. So the objectives of this study are to look at the sediment that could be released during dam removal and comparing that to the average annual amount of sediment essentially that's going through the system, passing through the project and into the Kinney and into the St. Croix rivers just naturally as it exists right now. And then also looking at the potential effects of the dam removal on geomorphology and aquatic resources. So basically, where could sediment get deposited if there's a release event? And if so, what kind of potential damage might that cause to aquatic resources? So things like fish and mussels and different types of biological resources. So the study methodology for this is still under development. I think we've got a pretty good handle on it at this point, but just working on wrapping up what that's going to look like. But the results of this study as well are going to be kind of wrapped in and going to be informing the decommissioning plan. So it's going to be a combination of desktop calculations and assessments, some field measurements, looking at things out in the field and the conditions where they are, and kind of wrapping our heads around what that's going to look like.
So Leslie, you're maybe going to get into it, but this additional study that was requested by FERC, we estimate that at about 40,000, correct?
Yeah, it probably be a little bit less than that, but yeah, probably right around 40,000.
That's a good segue into this. Sorry.
Yes, that was good timing. So there's a lot of numbers on here, but there's a lot of studies that we have going on. So I'll walk you through this a little bit. So this is our budget update. So remember, the RSP stands for Revised Study Plan. And so the Revised Study Plan is essentially the final study plan package that we put together to FERC. And after that, FERC would make a study determination. But within the Revised Study Plan, we did have budget estimates for each of the studies. They weren't estimates based on bids from contractors or anyone in particular. It was kind of our best estimate of based on what we knew of the site, what we thought each study would cost. So there was a budget estimate for each of the studies. The one exception to that is that FERC sediment study, because that came out, that was required by FERC almost a year after the revised study plan was submitted. So that one wasn't in that original total because it didn't yet exist. So the middle column is the current budget projection. So for the studies that were done in 2019, those are pretty much real numbers. That's what they costed, and the difference of the budget estimate versus the current budget projection is on the right hand column. So overall in 2019, I think most, if not all of the studies came in at or below budget. And with some of the 2020 studies, some of those were right on budget as well. And I think some were a little bit above that. So, and I'll go through that a little bit more as to why that might be on the next slide. But the current budget projection for studies is around 493,000, and it's with a difference of about 73,585 from the RSP budget, which also includes that additional 40,000 just right off the top because that wasn't in the revised study plan.
Leslie, could I ask a question? I'm sorry.
Sure.
Well, I was just going to say that this is the 420 is about what we told you last June, what we thought would cost. So this is how far we're off that initial estimate.
So Kevin mentioned, I hope I'm not out of school here. Kevin mentioned that we may be looking at drawing down the dams based on FERC's sort of wink and nod so far verbally. How will that affect the sediment study? Will we have to get that done before we do that, or can we? I mean, I'm questioning if we're going to draw it down now anyway to figure out what's wrong with the dam and where we really sit. At some point, does it really make sense to do the sediment study? Because can we make the argument that, hey, if we're going to do this, the sediment study really is insignificant. Can you comment to that, or
Sure, I can.
maybe I'm not connecting those properly, but
Right, and in the sediment study, is really looking at the amount of sediment that's coming, that normally goes through the system. So both projects are run-of-river projects. Both impoundments are, pretty much already, filled with sediment. So any extra sediment that's coming in is still going out at this point. So FERC's first question is just, what is that sediment load under normal baseline conditions, regardless of flood? And even with the flood, certainly it washed a lot of sediment down, it redeposited things, but overall, we haven't done any measurements yet, but based on what our current thinking is overall, while redistributed, the amount of sediment is probably still pretty close to those 2016 estimates that we had from the interfluve studies that were done with the bathymetric mapping that was done out there. So that part of it doesn't really change. So, and then also we're looking at the effects of the geomorphology and aquatic resources downstream. So not so much what's happening in Lake Louise itself, but when that dam is removed, how could that area downstream in the Kinnickinnic River potentially get impacted? So from that standpoint, the sediment study that FERC is requesting isn't really taking a deep dive into the sediment into Lake Louise in particular right now. It's not looking at sediment samples for potential contamination. It's not, asking us to redo bathymetric mapping or anything. It's really looking at the end of the day, what the potential effects could be on the river system itself, both of the Kinney and then downstream in the St. Croix. Did that answer your question?
well, it did. It wasn't the answer I wanted to hear. The answer I wanted to hear was FERC. We can tell FERC that we don't have to do it, and we have to spend the $40,000. That's okay.
Right.
Thank you. Thanks for your answer.
And we have talked, quite a bit about, with the flood that happened, are there any new studies essentially that we need to do just to try to kind of figure out what the conditions are on the site right now? And I think, in talking to our engineers on the project, we all feel that, down the road, when we are actually proposing to take the dam out 4 or 5 years from now, after FERC gives us approval to do that, and we have all of our permits, that most likely the site will have returned to normal kind of baseline conditions regardless, just because rivers themselves are dynamic systems. So a lot of the assumptions that we were working under originally, I think, are still in play. But we're going to take a closer look at that, during the sediment study and also in the decommissioning plan.
Thank you.
Sure. All right, so then getting back to budget numbers a little bit. So some of the difference in the study budgets that we were seeing in 2019, as I mentioned, we were just under $6,000 under budget, under what was projected. So that was a good start. In 2020, we're seeing that the program, or the studies that are getting contracted out through the past program, that Corps of Engineers program, the estimates that the Corps is getting are coming in generally higher, than what we had estimated in the revised study plan, for various reasons. Basically, how that process works is, for studies that can be conducted inside the Corps, they've done some of those, but other studies, they have, they're called IDIQ contracts, pre-approved, essentially government contractors under this program. So there's a select handful of different companies that these contracts go out for bid for. So it's kind of like an RFP process that you guys might have normally, and only it's under kind of, more selected individuals. So some of the estimates they were getting just were generally higher than what we had estimated. And then, of course, the newly required FERC study is going to add up approximately $40,000 just right off the top, because it didn't exist before when we had our original budget estimates. And then, for the past program, I think Kevin said when he gave you guys an estimate last year in July of 2019, we were estimating that the contribution of the past program was going to be about $120,000 to basically offset the cost of studies. And we have better, more accurate numbers at this point now that we're in the middle of the past program. So in the next part of the slide, it looks like the study contribution from that program is going to be more like $170,500. So a little bit more than $50,000 than when we were thinking and hoping at this time last year. So, which, basically sets off the the FERC study request, and then a little bit more too, just, you know, to help defray some of the added study costs, just for the studies coming in a little bit higher than what we had estimated. And the total contract value for the past program is $210,000. And some of that, of course, is covering some of the administrative costs for core staff and just operating the program as well. And then overall in the FERC process budget, you know, as far as, you know, summary reports and coordinating the FERC process and working through the different items, you know, we're within budget on that and all the estimates that we've given to the Utility Advisory Board previously. So next steps, of course, are to complete that second study season. So the last study should be, field work at least anyway, should be wrapping up in October. And then we're going to be summarizing and writing up all the reports. And then the updated study report, which is the study report of the year 2 studies, will be going out in January of 2021. So. And at this point,
that's also, Leslie, when the decommissioning plan is due, correct? In January of 2020.
Yes. Yep. So at this point, I'll open it up. Kevin, unless you want to say any last words, I'll open it up to any questions or discussion that you guys have.
Now, I'll set Brian Hatch up just a little bit, and then we'll go to questions. Brian is going to talk about what the flood did to the dam and some of the components to the dam. It potentially changes the decommissioning plan a little bit. We're going to find out in the next month, hopefully,
Right.
if and how that's going to change.
Right. And at this point, we would just be guessing it'll either, guessing whether we're kind of moving on as we had before, or if the flood will, with the dam safety part, will kind of change the direction we need to take with it.
Okay. Yeah. Now, if there are any questions, I'll just get out of the way.
Leslie, this is Sarah Carlson. I just wanted to, because I'm going to be touching on this a little bit later when we speak about the financials. Can you verify for the group how much is remaining to be billed based on the budget that you showed before?
How much is remaining to be billed?
Mm-hmm.
Gosh, I don't know. So based on, let me see, the best way to kind of walk through that. I don't have that number, I guess, in front of me. So all the 2019 studies certainly have been completed to date. Most places will submit invoices monthly, and kind of how it works with the past program is River Falls won't pay the past program directly, but essentially there's like an offset with the cost share part of it. So we need to make sure that the studies that River Falls is paying for is at least 50%, if not more than the total that the Corps essentially is paying for. So out of the, 493,000, about 170,550 is coming from the Corps. And then how much has been billed to date? Maybe a third, I would guess, of what needs to be done in 2020 has been billed to date, just based on kind of a lag of when fieldwork gets done versus when the invoices come out. But most of the studies that are getting done in 2020, certainly not all, but most of them are getting done under that past program. So, from that perspective, the percentage that's coming out of River Falls is much smaller than what it was last year. The past program wasn't approved until December of 2019. So essentially all the studies that were done in 2019 did come out of River Falls directly. Did that help?
Yeah, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, the past program was a big win. I mean, getting the Army Corps involved was very difficult and time consuming, but it's paid off. It's paid off more than we anticipated. So that is a positive.
Mm-hmm.
I have a question for Leslie. This is Mark Spafford. My question is, have any of the studies changed in scope? And are any of the studies completed showing any type of surprise?
Let's see, the first question on scope, I'm going to say, no, really our scope hasn't changed. So within the FERC process, we had, the revised study plan really pretty well defined what that scope was going to be. And there were a few very minor modifications in FERC's study determination, which came out, gosh, June or July of 2019. So they had a couple of very minor modifications. But since that time, the existing list of studies has not changed. So the only modifications I would say we've had to have to do, which were pretty slight, were just based on schedule. Based mostly with COVID-19, things kind of got delayed. And then with the flood, it kind of delayed on paper when people were coming out, but in the end, it really didn't negatively affect any of our timelines that we had promised FERC that we would do. And then let's see, I'm sorry, what was the second part of your question?
Yeah, it was any of the studies that are
Results.
completed? Yeah, results. I'd heard too that wasn't the mussel study supposed to go like how many miles south of the Kinney in the St. Croix?
Yep, the mussel survey was just completed last week. So I got just a really brief email blurb from the malacologist, the mussel biologist who was out there on the river. And so what the mussel survey required us to do and what we did is we surveyed the last 0.8 of a mile of the Kinnickinnic River. And then we did 6 miles of the St. Croix. So between the confluence of the Kinney and the St. Croix until it meets the Mississippi River. So that's what FERC required, and that is what was completed. And which is a little bit interesting, and a good thing about that study is we did use the Park Service and the Army Corps dive crew, and they've been out there previously over the last decade or two conducting samples. So they had designated sample stations essentially every mile-ish, probably a little bit more than that, within the St. Croix. So we actually can compare the data that they collected this year to the results of prior years. So just from the real preliminary, again, a quick email that I got at the end of last week, it sounds like the results are pretty much as they would have expected. Good diversity of mussels. I think they said between 12 and 15 species of mussels, depending on which sites on the St. Croix. No live or dead mussels found in the Kinney, but we didn't necessarily expect to find much, if any, mussels on the Kinney, just because it's a very different type of waterway. Certainly a good waterway for trout, but not as good for mussels.
Any mussels like the ones that we had found up in Stillwater were the Higgins eye, and it cost us a lot of money. So that's kind of where I was.
Yep. Yeah, and the St. Croix, we knew there were mussels in the St. Croix. The St. Croix is kind of mussel heaven as far as the Midwest. So it's a phenomenal resource for mussels. And I think it's, it still is that way. There certainly are, state and federally listed mussels that are known to occur in that waterway. So that wasn't a surprise. And part of the question and part of what I think FERC wants to get at with their sediment study is, looking at, with the removal, do we have the chance of impacting that resource in any way? Is the dam removal gonna, potentially have any effect down that far, which is, pretty far downstream from where Powell Falls is.
Mark, I can fill you in on 2 things that were kind of, I don't know, surprises. When we lost the SONs for the water quality report during the flood, we had to replace those very quickly. And that was about a $6,000 hit to the utility to have to replace those really quickly. Ayers did get those and got those back in the water and probably lost maybe 10 days off that study. So it wasn't terrible, but they were gone. And then the rec study, probably good news there is a lot of people recreating in the river this year, as you probably are aware of. So I think the rec people had some success reaching out and getting good surveys. And they're doing that one more time, Leslie, correct? Coming up here soon.
Yeah, I think at least one more time. So I think they were already out in August, and probably either again end of August, early September, sometime in that time frame, will be out again.
Yep, but they had no problem with finding people in the water. So those two things from the surveys that stick out in my mind is the new investment for new SONs, and then the rec study was good. Yeah,
and and with the kind of some of the constraints and just the challenges, I guess, we had with COVID-19. I think we had a few conversations early on. We talked to FERC about schedule, we talked to the Corps about schedule, and Kevin and I certainly talked about things. And everybody kind of understands it's a unique circumstance, it's affecting everybody. And FERC was just saying, hey, if there's any deviations in schedule, please just let us know what those are. And certainly, as Kevin alluded to as well, while the recreation study is going on, maybe the results are a little bit different, maybe more people doing certain activities, more of some, less of something else. It's, hard to know, but this year's a little bit of a recreation front, I think, with all studies. All right, any other questions?
Leslie, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, just taking a look at your budget update here. Of these studies, what would be the bare minimum of the studies? Like if we were looking at this, just looking at the dollar amounts, and then which ones were sort of added based on like stakeholder comment going through this process?
Well, versus what we proposed versus what agencies or stakeholders requested versus what FERC required, maybe?
Yeah.
Well, my gosh, I'm trying to dust off some cobwebs here to remember what we had proposed originally. So, it was a mix. For the study request comments, I think we had over 30 individual line item requests, not necessarily 30 studies, but, different agencies or stakeholders asking for different things in different ways. So this is certainly a long list, but, kind of compared to where we started with that, it was certainly quite a bit longer. So I think the H&H study is something that we, kind of always knew we would need to do within this process. And, part of the reason this project is a little bit more unique too with a FERC relicensing is not only are we proposing to relicense and keep a facility in place and understand what those conditions are, but we're also proposing to remove a facility. So that, does increase the need for some of the studies. But certainly water quality, I think, is one that we all understood we would need to do. I would say the shoreline habitat, aquatic invasive, and riverine habitat were all added on based on a combination of agency and stakeholder requests. The wetland, riparian, rare species survey we had proposed to do early on. Recreation, I think we knew we would need to do a recreation survey. Mussel survey is something that we strongly proposed not to do, but FERC actually, just based on the fact that we didn't think there would be any mussels in the Kinnickinnic River, but FERC did require that study, and other agencies and stakeholders asked for it as well. But at the end of the day, FERC required it, and that was just more for potential concern of, what could possibly happen down in the St. Croix. And then architectural, archaeological, I think we always knew those would need to happen. Decommissioning, the decommissioning plan is kind of an interesting one. It's not really a study per se in my mind. It's more of a plan that typically is kind of in line with the license application, but we put it in here because FERC wanted to see it sooner than later. They didn't want to wait until we had the draft or final license application. They wanted it to be more of a conversation, so we moved that up in the schedule. So while not really a study, it's really more of a plan that the studies are feeding. We are kind of including it in here as well. And then, of course, the FERC sediment study was just required by FERC this year.
All right, thanks.
Mm-hmm.
Leslie, was the sediment study, though, was that a request after the initial study plan that came out of that from stakeholder groups?
The FERC sediment study was a requirement in a May of 2020 letter. So it was in response, that was FERC's response to our initial study report. So that we, submitted the initial study report, agency stakeholders provided comments on it. We responded to comments, issued another report, and then FERC basically said, hey, we would like you to do this. And it wasn't really, I think there was pieces of it certainly that, different agencies or stakeholders were asking at different pieces, but kind of the way that the FERC packaged that particular study request, it was a little bit more unique to them and their questions, I think, that they had specific to the decommissioning plan, to the draft decommissioning plan that they saw.
Leslie does a fine dance with FERC on that because you sort out the initial requests of 30 or so, and then Leslie talks to FERC and says, geez, wink, wink, what are you going to require? So now we're trying to pick out 4 or 5 that we know they're going to ask for. And then you don't want to totally ignore all the stakeholder groups. So you have to have some in there that recognizes their comments, but not too many. So it's this fine dance of what you offer. And I think we offered probably the right amount because they did tack on a couple that we didn't have.
Yep.
And I don't think we had anything in here that wouldn't have been required, is how I feel. Leslie, am I characterizing that correctly?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, certainly there's nothing in here that, we are using the ILP. And with that process, FERC, does make the study determination. And, with this project, we knew we had a lot of active and interested agency and stakeholder groups. There's a lot of interest and a lot of various opinions. So we actually wanted to use this particular process that would bring FERC in earlier and kind of act as a referee, if you will, and basically draw the line and say, this study is required, this study is not required. And that's part of why we chose the process that we did on this study. And at the end of the day, the DNR is still the water quality certificate, the 401 agency. And so they do have conditioning authority. And I think there's certainly some studies that aren't on this list, but the DNR is interested in. So, at some point, with the process that we need to work through with DNR, there could be a couple more. But these are the studies that at the end of the day, FERC required for the process.
Can I ask a question, Leslie? Of all these studies, and maybe I missed it, but which ones would be for relicensing and which ones would be related to removal of the dam?
Oh, it's, some of it's a little bit of a mix. So the H&H study, I think really is more probably, I'll just talk each one of them. What is more for the dam removal. Water quality is a very typical study that's required for relicensing projects. So I think regardless, we would have been doing that one. Lake George is specific to the relicensing because Lake George is staying. So that's more specific to that process. Aquatic invasive, I think, is probably more typical of relicensing, more so than the removal, but also just a little bit of concern of what could possibly move downstream with the removal. So that one really has more of a two-prong approach. And again, the wetland and riparian one, that one was more to document existing resources that we have and just, if anything could possibly change with relicensing, but more so if something could change or potentially be affected by soil disturbance with decommissioning. Recreation is pretty common with relicensing, so that's more of a relicensing study. Mussel survey, sometimes are required for relicensing, but for this one in particular, it was really, I think, more tied to the dam removal that we're proposing. And for the architectural and archaeological, pretty common in relicensing, decommissioning, obviously, removal and sediment with removal.
So Kevin, I think I asked last time we talked, none of the stakeholders have come up with any money for any of these projects?
No, not yet, no. I know Scott has asked any collaborative group to give a report to City Council, the second meeting in September. So tune in to the second council meeting in September. The collaborative group is going to give an update on their fundraising efforts.
And is the city's position still not to pay for any dam removal?
Mr. Morissette, you probably can answer that best.
It's interesting. I just had this conversation with City Administrator Simpson this afternoon. The city's position is that there will not be general fund revenues used to remove the dams. That comes in a host of different, there's a host of different options available. The main one and the intent with the Kinney Collaborative is for them to contribute as much as possible, obviously. I do know that they have got some donors working, and there are some possibilities for some bigger things. But right now, we haven't tackled that yet. I think that still remains to be seen where that comes out. The numbers range from 2.5 to, in my mind, 4. But I think I may be a little pessimistic about my number. and it's not based on anything more than just pure pessimism from how much these things tend to get away from us, as we've seen in the study budget. So I don't know if that's a great answer for the question. I know that's a burning question that this committee has been keeping an eye on, and I appreciate that. From a standpoint, that's what the Utility Advisory Board should be doing, is keeping an eye on that very issue. But I think it's developing is probably the best way to put it. I don't know, Kevin, if you've got anything to add to that.
No, that characterizes it best. I'm glad you and Scott talked about that today, because him and I have had similar conversations, but I think this is really going to be driven by the Utility Advisory Board and the City Council. This is going to be a policy decision, I believe, of how that gets funded in the end, because I know there's some feelings about that. Am I wrong to say that, Scott, or am I on target there?
I believe you're on target there. I think we've got a general framework for what, more importantly, what is not going to be used. But I think the other things that have to be considered are still out there. My preference, obviously, is that the Kinney Collaborative raises the money for it. Does that mean that the ratepayers or depending on the different things, the different utility funds may have to kick in some money? That's a possibility, I think, but it will not come out of general fund money at this point. Well, it will not come out of general fund money, period.
Well, the burning question is it
we're going to continue to have these studies come out of the general fund.
No, these studies are being funded by the revenues that have been diverted from hydro generation into a separate fund inside electric, if I'm not mistaken, Kevin. Electric is go ahead, Kevin.
Yeah, I went back and looked at that memo and resolution that we sent to the UAB and council last year in July. And yeah, the intent, so these studies, we're not going to have generated all this money in the first few years to pay for all these studies. So we're going to have to go into the reserve fund to pay for some of these studies up front. But then the goal is that the operation, especially of the upper, over time is going to help pay for these over time. That was one of the reasons of leaving the upper in, is to, over time, it's going to generate enough revenue to offset the cost of the relicensing.
So Scott, just so, because I just making sure I'm clear. So potentially the ratepayers could help fund with the Kinney Collaborative removing the dams, and then also could end up having to pay more in their electric bill because of the removal of the dams, and we have to find electricity in other ways.
That would be a fair assumption. I think that would be plan D or E or F in my vision. I think it's too early to tell exactly how those expenses are going to be paid for at this early date. I think the intention right now is that the Kinney Collaborative generate $5 million to help offset these fees, at least for the immediate future. There's a host of things that are out there in that Kinney Collaborative plan that the city, service organizations, interested citizens will contribute to. You know, for instance, some of that as we draw down the lake, we may see a seeding, not a retraction of water, but a reseeding of grasslands. Find organizations like Trout Unlimited or Friends of the Kinney or somebody like that who might take that type of activity on. So if we're talking strictly about the dams and the related pieces, that is a fair assessment, Kellen, is that the utility ultimately on the hook for it, and we'll have to figure out how to pay for it in some shape or form.
But Scott, that wasn't the agreement that moved forward to the council from the board, was that they would end up at some point paying for some of this dam removal. Correct?
The resolution that was adopted, by the council on May or March of 18, I believe it was, Kevin, states no city general funds will be used, period. Which leaves it to the utility. There's things in the utility that may pay for it or may have to. How we do that, whether it's bonding, whether it's cash, whether it's borrowing from other funds. I think we're too early in the process to determine what that looks like. My comment would be this committee, this advisory needs to keep an eye on that and keep their sights on that. That's a charge that I think the council wants out of this committee. But right now, the only thing that I don't, to be honest with you, Kevin, I don't remember exactly the recommendation that came out of that, out of the UAB or out of the Kinney corridor meetings, because there was differing suggestions, if I recall, that came from the UAB differed from what came out of the Kinney corridor meetings, and the council sort of came up with their own, a little bit of each. Is my sense on that one.
I was a hybrid version, so I think Kevin Swanson, I think you're probably accurate. The spirit of what this board was advising is kind of what you described. But the Kinney group, what they call the Kinney committee or whatever they were called, Scott, I can't remember the exact name.
I can't either. I've had too many other things happen.
Right. So we had a utility advisory board recommendation. We had a Kinney committee recommendation, and then we had a hybrid that the city council decided on. It was kind of a hybrid and compromise of all of that. It didn't look and smell exactly like what this board was discussing, Kevin Swanson. Similar in flavor, but not totally. But I know where you're going with that. The taste of saying ratepayers now have to pay for this, that's probably from what I'm hearing, not going to sit well with some.
Wasn't there another piece to this where with the removal of the dams, you had to find another source of renewable energy? Was that correct? Like you had to find something to replace it?
No,
that didn't carry forward.
No, I think there might have been that ever present argument about whether this was green energy. Some people felt it wasn't green energy. Some people felt it was green energy. But I don't recall a replacement. I mean, if we want to broaden out that energy generation spread between fossil fuels and solar and hydro, I mean, we've kind of already as a city taken some pretty dramatic steps. I mean, one of the first two, I think, well, at least with WPPI, I'm not sure about the state because I know there's wind all over too, but pretty dramatic step with our solar garden that's out in Sterling Ponds. I don't think there's not many other communities. Richmond is one, but there's not many other communities who've taken that big of a step and that big of a commitment to other sources of power.
But we'll still lose the energy that the dams make when they come offline and have to find other avenues to replace that. So then we'll pay more for that, and then whatever bond has to be passed to take this out, our taxes or our rates will go up for that too. Just
if we make the assumption that there's no contribution from any other organization or any grants from any other organizations, Corps of Engineers, again, Trout Unlimited, some of these other organizations, private grants. If we make the assumption that there's nobody else that's going to contribute anything, then that's correct. I think that we're going to end up with having to figure out how to take through the ratepayers and through the different utilities who might in certain ways have to contribute to different parts of the project.
What a bummer.
Yeah, Scott, as the liaison to city council, I think you can hear the tone tonight of what this board is thinking. So you can pass that along. That would be appreciated.
Well, and I want to be clear to this committee. I'm relaying right now what the city council is faced with. That doesn't mean that I'm happy about it at all.
Yeah.
I think, as Kevin mentioned, I'm very interested in where the Kinney Collaborative, the KCC is at today, what they're doing to start to get us to that goal or to start to fund some of this. I think, remember back when we got these original lists of studies, quite vocal about the fact that these stakeholders, kept firing off letters to FERC telling them that we should have all these studies, yet they're not willing to open up their checkbook. So I think if this is something the community wants, the community needs to pay for it. Does that mean that the city might have to stay with some? Yes, but that means that there's other people in the community, these stakeholders can't just run silent into the night here. They've got to start stepping forward with some different things as well.
Well, I hope you're able to convey that message, Scott.
Yep, I will certainly carry that message forward, believe me. It won't be hard for me to carry that message forward because it's not much different from my vision.
I think we got the same intent.
Yes.
Kevin, as we start to get closer to this and everything, and we get a better sense down the road how much they fundraised or didn't fundraise or whatever they came up with, will you be providing everyone with the dollar amounts for the various bonds or, that everybody will be on the hook for and how much extra will have to be paid?
Most definitely.
Okay.
As we get there. So I guess I'm usually an optimist, but my pessimistic view is FERC is, when they relicense our project, and part of that relicensing is decommissioning and removal of Powell Falls. Once they make that order, we can't just say, well, we don't have the money, we're not doing it. Because once the order is made, then that has to happen. So that's when people could be on the hook and it could get contentious if people don't step up. So Kellen, you're wise to recognize the potential ripples in the water ahead.
Nice pun.
And again,
unintended, but boy, I was right there on that.
Got a long way to go here, and I think a lot of things are going to change with regard to that process. I think the least optimistic or the most pessimistic view is the one that everybody I think is the most afraid of, myself included, from what I'm hearing from others on the board, is that there's nobody that steps up. There's no Corps of Engineer grants. There's no Trout Unlimited grants. There's no grants or gifts from any private foundations. KCC hasn't raised a dime, and the city's on the hook for 100% of it.
I think the other real fear, though, is, Scott, like, if rates go up just because there's nothing to generate more energy and we have to buy more, so the ratepayers have to pay more, then on top of that, they're going to have to buy a bond. River Falls, as someone who just moved here 4 years ago, like, this is a really expensive place to live. Like, it's just going to add expense to it. And what a bummer for that. When a town is trying to attract more families to grow, you're going to make it more expensive to live here just because a small subset of the population wanted to see some dams removed. What a bummer.
I don't disagree. But again, I think I would caution us to be careful about being too pessimistic at this point, because there's a lot of unknowns that we don't know right now. There's a lot of things that we don't have any idea about with regard to funding, or what's going to be found in some of these studies, or what may come of these types of things. Again, I will say, as a city council representative, there were a lot of people in the community. There were a lot of people not in the community too, but there was a lot of people in the community who felt strongly about this. And you know, I think the community is the word that I keep using, needs to step up and pay for it. That doesn't just mean the city. That means organizations that are out there. So I think it's good for us to be a little pessimistic right now about who's going to pay for this, because I think that's what the council wants out of advisory boards like this. You know, EMS is going through some things right now as well, and I sit on that committee too. They're going through some things, and it's pretty much past the main decision points, but that type of advice and oversight is what's needed out of these types of committees. And I'm not saying you shouldn't worry about it today. I'm just saying let's keep an eye on it with some view towards exactly what you're saying, Kellen, is what does that do to the ratepayers? What does that do to the cost of living in River Falls?
The tone has been heard loud and clear, and I think Scott can carry that forward.
I still really like you, Scott.
Appreciate it.
So we're an hour into this one.
Yeah.
I'm not going to cut it off, but ask if there's any change of pace questions.
Let's get this thing rolling. This was the big one. This was the meat. So yeah, we gotta start rolling through them, and they're gonna go pretty quick, Patrick. I think once we get rolling. The next one might have a few more questions, but then we're gonna pop through these pretty quick.
All right.
So let's try to go like 10 minutes of segments so we can get out of here. Okay.
Are we moving on from the first one then?
I think so. Leslie, thank you very much. That was very thorough. Great discussion tonight, and that's quite a bit to digest, but thank you, Leslie.
Thank you, and I'm going to stop sharing my screen for whoever's on next.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, I'll share. The next one will be Brian.
Okay, Brian Hatches, we're going to stick on the dams for just a bit here. Brian is going to go over the flooding episode and what impact it had on Powell Falls, which is ending up being fairly significant. So, Brian and Leslie or Lene is going to share the screens to show you some pictures of what happened there.
Right. Well, good evening, everybody, and thank you, Lene, for doing the PowerPoint.
You get working on it, Lene? I don't see it yet.
I don't see it either.
Is it coming up? I put share. Got it up here. Sorry. Can
There
you
it comes.
guys?
Here it's coming now. There we go. And now just go full screen on that, and then we're ready.
Sorry, it's pausing for some reason.
Well, I can start anyway.
Yeah, go ahead, Brian.
On June 29th, as everybody probably knows who lives around here, we had a pretty significant rain event, and we ended up having quite the flood. At one point, it was like 6 feet over Junction Falls, and some of the pictures in that slideshow attest to the staff gauge as it went up during the day. Powell Falls was taken offline early that morning at about 4:30 because the kilowatts were dropping, and there was a lot of debris in the water, and it was just plugging up the intake. So I didn't want it to go off hard, so I took it offline at 4:30. And then Junction was under the same conditions, so it came offline later on in the morning after I got to work at 7.
Advance, couple.
You see
And
that one?
that was the South Fork from the Wasson Bridge Southwestern Bridge there. And this is looking into the Powell Falls. The water at that time was into the main floor, but that's below the generator floor, but it was significantly flooded with silt. And now it's just, we're dealing with dry mud now. So we can move on to the next one. This is where it was trying to junction at the water, the main stem of the Kinney was trying to make a new channel right below where the pathway goes down to the junction bottoms there. It was trying to cut a new channel through the woods, and that was the debris that it left.
Next slide.
And if any of you are familiar with the bridge, this was pretty much the high point of the flood. Usually you can see the archways that are on the supports, but the archways were totally, this is when it was about 6.5 feet above Junction Falls. And you can move it on. This is the staff gauge in the morning, and the normal dam crest is 865.3, and that was, this is the dam at 867.9 at 2:20. And then it kept going. You can go on again.
Next slide.
So the one with the, go back one, would you, Lynette, please?
Sure, absolutely. Sorry. Now it's going to advance here.
Oh,
Sorry,
okay.
guys.
Nope, that's fine. And that's okay if you can't. I mean, everybody knows it was pretty significant flood.
Okay.
But the staff gauge, I just wanted to show you that the staff gauge had totally disappeared by the afternoon. It was gone. You couldn't even see the staff gauge anymore. So that's when it was the significant part. Down below junction, where you can see the overflow pressure valve, the water was coming straight out of it. This was after everything was turned off. And down below in the damaged area, this is a sewer line, I believe, that was exposed from, that's where the new channel was trying to be cut through that area. You can go on. This is from the looking down at Powell, at the headworks of Powell are pretty much underwater at this point. And you can still see the railing. If any of you have been down there, you know when you're standing there, the gate works there, and you know how tall the gate works are. But this is where it's totally underwater, and it was moving a lot of debris down the river.
So I want to give a couple points in this picture too, Brian. So that sign you see there, that sign by the light is gone.
No,
And the water was actually over the railing, correct?
no, that's the other side sign that's gone.
Okay,
This side's still there. It's the other side gone.
Okay.
That sign got smashed by a tree.
But you thought it was maybe 6 feet over that dam. Is that which we decided?
Yeah,
there?
that's about right. And when it's that high and when it's inside the building, it'd be about that. Yeah. Next. And this is in the break, where there's about 10 feet. I think that's a movie, but it might not play that well. This is where the break is. It's about 10 feet of the right abutment that has been smashed away, and I had a rake vertical to see how tall it was, and that's down to the bedrock there, or the limestone bluff, because the limestone bluff is still there and it moves around in the corner. But that's the deepest spot right there of the break. So it's 2-3 feet when there's enough water. So go next.
Next.
And there's a piece of Powell that was gouged out on the river facing side, down facing side of the dam. That had been a loose piece of cement for a long time, but something decided to take it out on that flood time. So you can go next. And that's a video too, but I was kind of ambitious with my videos. And that's just another picture of the break with the limestone that you can, there's another picture in here where you can see the intact versus the gone. So we can move on. There's the part of the dam, the right abutment. The piece that's missing is from the left over about 10 feet. And then the next slide should be where it's gone.
That's pre-flood and
That's after. Now, this is the flood in the tree you can see there. And that, I believe that's the tree that knocked that piece of the cement out. And now this is what's left, is it's right down to where the limestone is for the bluff.
so Brian, do you anticipate the lake's level lowering then to that point at some point?
It might, if the water we have a really good water right now. So it might go down that far, but the water has to go down. Right now it's up, it's still going over the dam. Even when I was generating, it was still going over the dam, so.
Go ahead, next.
This was looking down from the headworks at Junction. It was about 6-7 feet above the crest of the dam at this point. And all the vegetation that usually lives below Junction Falls was totally wiped clean. And you can see in the far distance where that's the area that it was trying to make a new channel through the woods. You can next.
Thanks.
Oh, okay.
We're done.
That's good.
Yeah, Brian,
Very
so
good.
talk to us a little bit about the condition now of Powell Falls generation and what's happening with it there, and then we'll move on.
We're dealing with some vibrations after it was started again. And now tomorrow actually we're going to do an entry to look at the bearings and make sure the bearings get adjusted, so we can move up and see where the vibrations. Hopefully it's just the turbine was the bearings were out of adjustment, or there was something in the turbine. So that's what we're going to do tomorrow, and then we're going to flood it and get it back running and get it back spinning again and see where we go from there. It was still producing about 80 kilowatts or so, even after the break. And there was still water going over the dam. I had Junction Falls back on July 2nd, and Powell took a little longer. It took about 8 days to get that one back online. It was full of mud, and it was you couldn't really do anything in there. So
summary, Powell Falls, you got back online. You heard some vibrations, checking out, took it offline. Now you're thinking about putting it back online again.
Yeah, after we check everything out. Yep.
Okay.
But
And we're waiting for FERC for their order to us. They wanted a full report of what we saw and happened during that flood. Brian did a real nice job laying out a report to FERC. They can have that report, and then they're going to report back to us what they'd like us to do.
And then I just have a couple more things.
Yep.
The damage that had happened, we lost the external screen for Junction Falls that we're going to remanufacture and replace. We lost the warning buoys, became detached, and those are reattached now. Other than the break, so that's the main damage.
Any questions for Brian?
Just what'd you estimate the cost to be to fix the break?
I don't have an estimate for that cost yet. I haven't been directed to get an estimate.
So Kevin Sonson's, when I talked to FERC about that, they understand that we're in the middle of relicensing and decommissioning that dam. And they asked me, they said, do you intend on fixing that? And I said, probably not. I mean, we're not going to spend, if that dam is coming out in 2024, 2025, I can't see this board spending $500,000 to try to fix that wing wall.
I don't know about 500 grand, but.
Well, I don't know. What's it going to take to build a road in there and get equipment in there and whatever. I can't see this board spending 50 grand to fix the wing wall, but maybe. Let you know when we find out what FERC wants us to do and then get an estimate on it.
Yeah.
And when the shaft was bent at the turbine, and it was $15,000 to fix. The city council had great debate about that.
No, it's not fixed.
It didn't get fixed.
No.
That was just to ascertain what was wrong with
Yeah, but you're right, Scott. The council said, "Nah, I don't think so." And Brian said, "Well, let's just run it." kind of
Yeah.
keep an eye on the speed.
We just been running it the way it is.
Brian, I know when talking to Kevin, or actually, I think when I talked to City Administrator Simpson today, are we concerned? Isn't there something stuck in the pen stock? Isn't there something in there, or we don't know what's in there, or did I not hear that right?
Yeah, that's what I heard. Was that what I heard last week, Brian? That maybe something was in the turbine.
No, the turbine usually gathers a lot of sticks when in a normal running situation, but when in the flood, it probably gathered some more. So what we do is we go in and we visually inspect everything, make sure there's no metal on metal, and remove any of the debris that's in the turbine. And then we align the bearings in order to get everything fairly straight, even with the bent shaft. And then we go and flood it, start it spinning again, and get it synced up and get it online. So there's nothing that I know of that's actually stuck in the turbine.
Okay, all right.
Or the pen stock on either of the machines.
Okay, my other question is, and again, I hope I'm out of school here, Kevin, but isn't there a concern about when we open that gate, whether or not we're ever going to be able to shut it again?
Oh, that you're talking about the waste gate.
Yeah, Brian. Yeah,
yeah.
Brian and I talked
In order
about
to draw,
that.
in order to draw it down.
Yeah, that's a concern. There's debris in the lake. I mean, there's logs and who knows what, bicycles. I don't even know what's in there. So if that starts going through gets stuck in the penstock underneath the gate, we won't be able to shut the gate until we get that out of there, and that will drain the lake doing that. So,
because if we come back to FERC and say we don't know, we're going to draw it down and take a look. We're kind of committed at that point.
Yeah, you have to deal with the DNR as well as far as how you drain it down. So it would be probably a really slow drawdown in order to get it to where we could inspect it. So that would take a little bit of time, and then you might be able to anticipate maybe if things too much stuff starts coming through before you get it open too far. So I don't know. You're right. I don't know. I've never done it, so this would be an interesting thing. So if we do it, if they say you got to draw it down, it'll be a new procedure for me, which will be interesting.
Well, we may want to draw it down, won't we?
Yes.
Potentially.
Yes.
So
personally, I'd like to draw it down. The damages on the other side. From my standpoint, the operator standpoint, I'd like to see what the damage is on the right abutment, and if there is kind of temporary to it, because the temporary fix doesn't have to last very long if it's going to come out in 2 years or 3 years.
As long as we can shut it again.
Yeah, as long as you can shut the gate. Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
I have a question for Brian, if that's okay.
Sure.
The you calling it the abutment? So you have the dam, and then you have the wing wall kind of going down.
Yeah, the wing wall abutment. That's the same thing. It's the right abutment to the bluff. Okay. So that's the 90-degree angle to the bluff from the dam base.
Okay. So does that wing wall run eventually tangent to the slope?
It runs into the. I'm sorry.
It runs into it. Okay.
Yeah,
and then,
it runs into.
So where that chunk is broke out, what is the elevation difference from the bottom of that breach, to the top of the dam, where the water
about 3
just
feet.
flows? Oh, it's about 3 feet.
About 3 feet, 2 or 3. It's 2 to 3 feet in some space. That's why I had that rake in there, because I wanted to see where it was at that time.
How wide then? How big of a? How many yards? How many square feet?
About 2 feet. It's about 2.5 feet wide. The dam structure itself, but 8 feet or 10 feet long.
Okay.
Hard to measure that it's gone. So it's probably about 8 to 10 feet of length of that wall.
Okay.
So
if it was drawn down, it could.
It's a slope. It's a slope. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Taken care of by handwork. It could be a fairly simple fix.
It could be.
Drill anchors into the existing slope there and put some rebar in, some forms, pour some concrete, and walk away.
It could be, but you'd still have to get it low enough in order to get over there. One of the ways you could get over there is across the dam itself. And that would, you wouldn't have to build a road or a pathway down across the wastewater treatment plant. So you could mix cement on the other side and bring it across.
Sure.
But you'd have to still get it low enough in order to do that. So
Sure. So my other question, Kevin, is what kind of revenue will we lose if we turn Powell off until 2025?
Yep, I looked at that today, 50,000 a year potentially.
Okay. All right. It's
I
more
mean,
money.
assuming you're making 150 and that's a third of the revenue.
Okay. So
That's
more money
before
that Kevin
expenses.
can come up with.
Yeah.
And what's the output today versus before the flood?
zero. There's no output revenue. Before the flood, I was able to get 110 or so out of it. But after the flood, because there's still so much debris in the water.
Yeah, that's right. Okay.
I was only able to get 80 before it started getting plugged up. Once it gets plugged up, it starts going down on its own really fast. So there's a lot of weeds and sticks and leaves in the water, and that really plugs it up really quick.
Okay.
So a lot of ifs and buts until we get FERC's order back in, which I'm waiting for with bated breath, which will really help our conversation and our planning. And you guys will be right on board with that as soon as I get it. We're gonna have a lot of decisions to make, not only as it relates to Brian's work, but as a decommissioning plan, sediment, all of that. So it's gonna play into a lot of the future.
Okay. Kevin, I would ask, is there an opportunity for the UAB people to get a hold of Brian and get a general tour? Nothing crazy or?
Oh yeah, Brian's a tour master. He likes giving that tour.
Okay.
Sure.
So I'd like to do that. I'll do that then. Thanks.
I'd like to do that too. I've never been down to the lower. I've never been down to Powell. I've been at Junk a couple times, but I've never been down to Powell. No.
Never been down there.
So Lene, maybe that's something you can offer, get with Brian, offer it up a couple dates and see if you can get a small group to go. Is that okay with everybody?
I'd certainly be interested in seeing that. Yeah.
Okay, good. Good. And then maybe we'll have more talking points by then too. I was hear back from FERC, so we'll wait and hear. All right, next slide presentation. Mr. Seiberling is going to talk a little bit about South Fork, I believe. Is that what's on the next?
Thank you, everybody.
It is.
Brian.
Thank you, Brian.
Thanks, Brian.
Patrick, did I jump up in your chili there? I'm sorry.
I don't mind, Kevin.
Sorry.
We're not voting on anything, so we can keep it informal.
I was sensitive.
I know.
Let's keep it rolling.
There you go. We're on the same page.
All right.
Take it away, Wayne.
All right. Thanks, everyone. Good evening. I'm here to talk a little bit about a few substation projects that's been going on in the UW substation and South Fork projects. So it looks like this is the first one, is the South Fork project. Crane here showed up the middle of June to move out our old substation transformer, and the crane on your left is, or the pictures with the crane in it, is what I was told to be the second largest in Wisconsin. This transformer weighed roughly 134,000 pounds when it came to us at that time. That truck and trailer was backed all the way in from the UW old farm down the old tracks and around the corner, remotely driven by the rear. So it was quite a sight to be seen to get it on site to where it was sitting there for this crane to pick it up and give it its new home. So go ahead, Lene. Yeah, you can see in the other left hand picture, it's almost in the new location. Some of these pictures are out of order, but The middle one here is also some of the old infrastructure that was in place before it was lifted off site. And then the tanker truck was the middle picture here, removing some of the oil out of it to be transported off site. So,
Oops, oh, I'm so sorry, Wayne.
oh,
I'm like going, oops, just got a little jumpy on me.
yeah, so these projects, like I said, have been going on since probably about May of 2019 was when the UW project started for us. It's been progressing to where you see this, there you go.
There you go. Sorry.
Progressing to this point in some of these slides you've already seen here, but it's working. I'm kind of lost my train of thought here, but I'll regain it. The UW substation and the South Fork are almost to the completion point together, roughly around a few week time frame. So, okay, the old infrastructure here is on your left with the old transformer, new transformer going in. So in the far right picture is new feeder cables and the new feeder breakers, the medium voltage breakers that you guys approved of in what might have been one of our last UAB meetings in February. So we could get this ordered for this project. Go ahead, Lene. So then I'm seeing the next slide, and that's what I'm going off and from instead of.
Oh, gotcha.
So sorry, everyone. So yeah, you can see this little bit better picture of the feeder cables that I was talking about, the new medium voltage, low voltage breakers, and help. And before all the fun stuff starts, where all the terminations and control cable go in place. So
I'm gonna get this back. I am sorry.
oh, no worries. So we've been working with Energist substation crews, contractors out of Green Bay. They've been helping us with some control cable, some structure work, and some concrete work for this new project. So yeah, here's kind of a picture late in a day of the new transformer, new rebuilt transformer, new equipment. It's pretty much how you see it out there on your left. If you go out there today, there's a few minor additional inner workings with some wire and some bus work that's been added. And then the two guys that you see in the picture on the left was taken, or on the right was taken last week. They were installing some jumpers from our high voltage transmission line down to the new gas breaker that's not pictured, but it was a good picture of these two guys, and why not incorporate some of the great teamwork that we have on our team and give them some recognition for their hard work as well. So yeah, this is part of the UW substation here, is part of Vista equipment that these guys were installing wires from and to the old. Some of it's coming from the old South Fork substation to buy the new UW substation. These are multiple runs of primary cable, ranging from 1000 MCM primary cable to 500 MCM cable. So there's two separate transformers now there at the UW they have the capabilities of looping their own system. Now they're actually running each transformer and half their load on each transformer as we speak. This is from what they told me last week. This project was delayed a few weeks with COVID. It was hit with the contractor on their side, was supposed to change over to their new transformer about Memorial Weekend, was delayed because of the COVID exposure and their crew. So it was basically pushed back almost all the way until after July 4th. And this picture here is what is of the old utility owned substation here. So with the old transformers that are already gone, this metal lattice structure has been removed. The overhead from this structure all the way back to the South Fork substation has been taken down. So it's all been removed. Sure, Tim has looked at this project many times, but it's definitely looks a lot different around this area since July 11th. It's really taken shape and move forward. Yes. There's any
So Wayne, just let them know when the South Fork substation, you're hoping will be online early next week. Is that what you're hoping? And then it'll all be completed.
Yes. Yep. We're hoping that to be online early next week for sure.
Any questions for Wayne?
Wayne, could you remind me again how that transition happens? And will the university feel anything?
Which transition are you talking? The UW?
Yeah, when you actually switch over, or is it kind of happening as you go? There's times that that system's out, or?
Yeah, we worked with their contractor and had a scheduled outage set up for Memorial Weekend, and it changed to July 11th weekend. So actually, the university was down. It was scheduled with their contractor, their electrical contractor, and us. So they actually shut them down that Saturday morning, and then the B&B contractor contracted through the university turned the systems back on that next day, Sunday. So they were actually down for 24 hours.
Okay. Yep.
And the second transformer, they actually had another shutdown so that they could parallel the two substations together and do some phase checking. It was down for a couple hours. So it's a coordination effort between all entities. So not only university, but there was state people involved as well.
Thank you.
Then Mark, when we do the South Fork substation, Wayne will be transitioning load off of the power plant substation over to South Fork.
Okay, that's that was another question. Yep, thanks.
Well, yeah, that'll tie those two together, and the utility ratepayers won't see anything if everything's done right. Won't see any problems with that. So.
If there's no other questions, we'll move on to Ron Groth, wastewater treatment plant. Big $2 million project going on there as well. So we're spending a lot of ratepayer money, and this is a really needed project and well-timed. So Ron, why don't you go ahead? Is Ron still on?
Yes, to the best of my knowledge.
Okay.
Go ahead, Ron. He texted me and said he's having problems again.
Okay.
Why don't we move to the next item?
Yep. We'll come back if we have.
Is that you, Kevin? The electric rate implementation update?
Yeah, I'll go real quick here. So if you guys can remember, it was probably a little over a year ago, we came to the Utility Advisory Board and then eventually to City Council, letting you know we were going to try to move to the Public Service Commission for a rate increase for the electric utility. And after Kellen's comments earlier, now I'm gun shy about raising the rates. We talked about this literally probably 14 months ago. It was about a year-long process with the Public Service Commission. They did a full examination of all of our income and expenses and all of our capital improvement projects. And we were anticipating at the time that we thought it'd be closer to a 10% overall rate increase. It's going to be about a 6.94% overall rate increase to our ratepayers. They fully approved this increase and implemented us and told us we had to do this back in May of this year. We could have implemented it in June, but we knew COVID was going on, and we thought June and July and August are the highest months of usage for our customers. So we delayed the implementation. It's going to go into effect September 29th. So that'll be for October usage. People will see it on their November bill. We're letting people know about this, and I have a 4-page little information piece going into the bill stuffer. We're gonna let people know, put all our smiling faces on the front, try to diffuse right out of the chute. These are the guys that keep your lights on 24 hours, 7 days a week. Then I go into a little explanation on the next page, just talking about our culture, why we do what we do. We've been doing this since 1900 for the citizens and customers of River Falls. Talk about the Public Service Commission, how they're involved in our rate increase. Talk about the fact that we haven't had a rate increase for 12 years. And prior to that, it was another 8 years. So really, we've only had about a 4% rate increase in about 20 years. So this will affect our customer classes a little differently. Lene, go to the next slide. Residential customers, you can't see it here, but when you get it in the mail, trust me, our residential customers, your average user is going to see about a 9.5% for a residential customer. It could be about $9 a month increase for our residential customers. Commercial customers are going to be a little bit less, maybe more in the 3 or 4% increase range. The biggest increase you're going to see is your standard monthly rate today is $7 a month. It's going to $12 a month. Now, that seems like a big jump, $5 a month. That is a big jump. People are going to notice that. They're not going to be happy with that. Industry standard today is around $14 a month. XL Energy charges $19 a month now for that flat monthly rate. Energy costs are going to go up a little less than half a cent a month. On the back cover, the 4th page of the flyer is going to show our existing customer rate. It's going to show what it's going to be in the new rate. You can't see it there, but I will tell you. I'm just going to tell you this right now. So a typical customer today is paying about $86 a month. You're going to go to about $93 a month for a typical 750 kilowatt hour a month user. So from about 86 to about 93, something like that. So you're going to see a jump. Energy rates going up less than half of a cent, but the biggest jump is in the flat monthly fee. We talked about that, 12, 14 months ago. As energy usage flattens, we have to collect the money on the flat portion of the bill. So that's kind of what's happening. And people are going to see that. Of course, they're not going to be happy with it. But again, this hasn't happened in 12 years. So I'm trying to think about simple phraseologies, right? So we've been in business 120 years. So that's about a 1 cent increase every decade. So if you think about it, since the beginning of 1900, we've gone up a penny every decade since 1900, roughly. A little less than that, actually, but in rough terms. So, is it a good deal? It's all relative. What people are going to be focused on is they're going to see about a $8, $9 a month jump in their electric usage costs starting in October. So that's going out. So Lene, why don't we make sure we send all the utility advisory board members and city council members a copy of this 4-page so they have it. So when their neighbors and ask them about it, they're ready.
Okay, absolutely.
Any questions on this? It's a little less than we thought initially, but it's going to be a ding to our customers. We tried to delay it, get through the hot months, get it in the shoulder months, so it won't be quite as dramatic as it would be in a July, August situation. So any questions? It's coming. Overdue probably, but it's coming. So if not, we'll move on. Go ahead.
Kevin, real quick, I just, as I looked into this, as we talked about this and you and I talked about it, I think one of the things that's becoming pretty prevalent and clear to me is that as people continue to use alternative sources of power, especially if it's behind the meter, you know, people putting solar panels on their roofs today, using those types of things, decreases the revenue that we generate for the city. And we have a set cost for that infrastructure in town. And so as you see people who are putting solar panels are the only ones right now that are really the most obvious ones. I don't know that there's many people using wind, but as they put these solar panels on their house and convert that power, or even put power back on the grid, that doesn't exactly help our overall rate structure, because that just takes away revenue from what we got going on. Similar to water, watering bans and low flow toilets and low flow shower heads are great, but it decreases revenue on something that's already a fixed rate. So we've got little choice but to increase that base rate in order to help stay in front of the wave that's coming of people who are looking at those solar panels for their private homes rather than contributing to the solar panel park that we've got out in Sterling Ponds.
Yeah, one of the ways I couched that in 12 or 14 months ago with both the UAB and council, you have to think of it in terms of paying for the availability of electricity, right? I mean, somebody that gets on a really high-tech solar system or a neighborhood generation plant through renewable energy, they might not even need the utility for 10 days out of a month. But with the days they need it, you're going to want us. And that pole and that wire and that transformer, it doesn't care if there's one electron running through it or you run it full of electrons. It has a 30-year lifespan. And you got to pay for that infrastructure that you want on the days that you're not generating. So you're kind of moved to a paying for availability type model as time goes on here. So that, to Scott's point, the monthly fixed fee has to go up in order to pay for that because we're not getting revenue through usage anymore. That's the feature model. And that's why. Not an answer everybody likes, but that is the answer.
Yep.
If you like reliability, right, and you want it when you want it. So, all right, let's move on.
Is Ron back on, or are we going to go to Mike Noreen?
Yeah, can you hear me now, Renee?
Oh, I can. Yes.
Let's go back to Ron. Ron's going to quickly go over and talk a little bit about what's happening at the wastewater treatment plant. Ron, you got quite a project going on there.
Yeah, sorry for the technical difficulties tonight. I'm having a challenge here. So.
Oh, you're good. You're on, so you're no problem.
So yeah, I guess we started about back in March. This is one of the first things we did. So there's a demo of the ditch building, the east ditch. Once we're done here, all those white buildings, if you've been down here that are over the ditches, those will all be taken off. There'll be a concrete bridge and mixer mounted to that bridge. That's about the only thing you're going to see up top. All the infrastructure, the aeration system will actually be down on the bottom now instead of on the surface. Next one, Renee. This was the next project we kind of did. This was moving our grid classifier. If you remember the project, this used to be in a different building. Why it was never put in the headworks building or in the screening building in the first place, nobody knew. It seemed like the logical place to put it because that was already a class 1 div 1 space, so which means it had proper ventilation and explosion-proof fixtures, things like that. So you didn't have to maintain 2 spaces. The other space where it was in, there was some debate whether it was actually suitable for that or not. Plus, it saves the operators a bunch of hassle. They don't have to move the solids around. It's basically what this classifier does is it takes the sand and the grit out of the water. So we can't treat it, so it ends up removing it and getting landfill. It goes into a dumpster and gets hauled away. Next. This was the operators actually took this on, so you can't tell too good here, but there was probably 50 yards of debris in the bottom of that tank. So it had never been taken out of the system since '79, at least that we knew of. And there's guys that have been here for almost 30 years. So basically, it's everything everything that settled out that couldn't stay suspended with the rotors turning. So a lot of sand, other debris that, and you can see it grew crops really good. We had quite a few tomato plants growing on there. So next one. So this is a comparison of the two aeration systems. The top frame is the old rotor. Those are the ones we've always talked about. We're breaking shafts, we're hauling them out of there with the crane, and it takes forever to replace them. So the bottom picture is the new blower system. That's actually going to deliver compressed air into the tank. And there's a later slide that'll show you how that's achieved. But this room here that we put them in, we actually repurposed the old grid classifier, what we had saw on that previous screen, we moved to the screener building. Well, we repurposed that building and put our blowers in there. Next. And this is the pipe bridge. So what we're going to do to run that compressed air over to the tanks, there'll be stainless steel piping overhead. So it'll go overhead on this pipe bridge all the way across to the tanks, then go down and feed the diffuser headers. Next. And this is what that pipe from the blowers are feeding. So that whole grid on the bottom, those are fine bubble diffusers. So they have a really fine EDPM membrane in them. The air comes up from the bottom. It really small bubbles. I mean that, you know, they have really good absorption into the water. That's kind of how your efficiency is achieved. It's a lot less waste than those old surface aerators that just were doing mechanical aeration. Next. This I put in. This is we did get our new screener in. It hasn't been installed yet, but I wanted to show you. I don't know how good you can see it, but that top one is the old screen, and it has like vertical bars, and there's a rake that kind of comes around. We lost a lot of debris through that, so you get a lot of stuff getting out into the plant, plugging pumps, getting wound around our mixers. Guys are fighting it all the time, plugging our mixing headers on our sludge tanks. That bottom one is the new screen, and that is actually a perforated plate, and you can see it kind of looks like a fine mesh. I actually operated one of these for about 12 years. It works great. I mean, it takes everything out. The only thing you ever see in the plant after that screen is hair. That's about the only thing that can make it through. You can kind of even see just something to point out in that top one. If you look real close in that old screener, there's actually a hypodermic needle sticking up in there, and we do actually see a lot of those. You know, they're Sharps containers. You're not supposed to flush them, but there's a lot of it still going on. So next. And this is what we have to complete yet. So that screen you saw, we have it on site. Hopefully that's going to get put in pretty soon, or you're getting a control panel mounted. We want to make that process as quick as possible. And then we're going to install that stainless piping on that pipe bridge over the diffusers. The mixers need to be installed in the ditch. And then once we operate that new screen that's installed, we operate it for 2 weeks. Then we're going to start filling that first ditch that we're completing. And when we're done with that, then we can start on the second ditch. And then the whole project, second ditch completion is scheduled sometime around the end of November. Hopefully it goes a little bit quicker. But I guess that's about it. That's the schedule right now. It's actually moving along pretty well. We haven't, I thought there was going to be some equipment delays with everything going on this year, but it's held up pretty well. We've actually got deliveries right on time. So contractor's been good to work with, got a good job, super. So yeah, it's working out so good so far.
Any questions for Ron?
Great presentation. Thanks, Ron. I did save a question for when Ron did come on, and that was the exposed sewage pipe across the Kinney. Did you guys experience any damage? Is there any movement? Is there a need or a rush to implement the new mechanical riprap that's supposed to eventually go over the top of that?
Yeah, what we did, because actually that pipe there, that wasn't one of the pipes that, you know, that is going to have to be armored once the dams are taken out. That pipe is usually, it's usually in a dry area. It's usually, you know, there's not water there, but I mean, there's just such an incredible force. You see the rock below the dam. We did backfill that again, so we put fill back in around it. It's ductile iron pipe, so it's pretty solid. We did actually have a manhole casting that they never had secured onto the cement, that the actual manhole structure itself, and that slid a little bit, but it wasn't enough to, I think it's plugged with debris, so it couldn't take on water. So otherwise, I mean, if you lose a manhole in a situation like that, you couldn't keep up with the water coming in that manhole. So no, I mean, everything held together. We did have, we had a few, fun hours here for a while that morning. I mean, we had a lot of flow coming in, but we managed to treat everything and get it through without damage. So.
So Mark, we did put some money in its future CIP to address some of that potential riprap situation. What did we put in there, Ron? 500,000? I don't remember.
I think we have about 300,000 in there. It's actually to upsize that line coming across by the treatment plant and then put the armor around it.
So we're not sure how much we'd have to participate in that, but we did put some money in there, 2024 or 2025, I don't remember. Future. Where are we at? Let's keep her rolling.
All right.
Okay.
Are we at Mike? Green block tariff update. Thanks, Ron.
Mm-hmm.
All right.
Mike, you're gonna let her rip here, Mike.
Okay. Good evening, everybody. I'm going to talk about the green block tariff and the change in price in that and why. And then also another program that we have coming up, line voltage smart thermostat. So the green block tariff, the price is changing because the cost of renewable energy is changing and it's going down. So we're passing that on to the customers just like we always do. In this case, the green block tariff is one of those that we encourage as a utility for people to participate in part because it is 100% renewable energy and they're simply buying it from us. It's simple, it's easy for them, and it's certified. So when we anticipated the price to change, how it works is similar to the city. It goes through some advisory groups, and I'm on one of them. So we look at the changes in this tariff, and we make recommendations, and we pass it on to the executive committee, which Kevin is on, and they approve those changes to the renewable energy tariff back in it was the spring of 2020. And so once we had their approval, each member utility has to take this tariff to the Public Service Commission to get it approved for their community. And because River Falls has been a leader in this field for the last decade, they asked if we wanted to go first, and we said we did. So we submitted it to the PSC in August, a couple weeks ago, and we expect them to approve that tariff. It says in the third quarter of 2020, but it's kind of hard to say really when it would be approved. It could be as late as early 2021. How that will change it is, as you recall, how you and City Council approved Renewable River Falls, where we are moving our infrastructure to renewable energy. That's going to impact us. We had powered our 7 facilities and our streetlights with renewable energy at the start of 2020, and that was at cost of $21,000. That's going to drop to $10,000. And also part of Renewable River Falls, once we're going to have this drop, then at that point we were going to add the other meters for the city and utilities to that, and then we would, such as well houses and lift stations and so on. And then that would still, powering all of the city and utility infrastructure, will still be less than $15,000. Next slide, please. This is kind of a breakdown on how this is going to work out. So today is what the tariff exists, and in the future is what we're going to see in once the PSC approves it. So right now you get a discount if you buy over 100 blocks, and in the future it'll go down to 20 blocks. And why they did that is because in part of what the city of River Falls has done and the utilities is if you, they want to encourage more cities to be like us, to buy more renewable energy for big users. The next one is the cost per block, going from $3 down to $2. And that's if you're not buying in bulk. If you're buying just 1 or 2 for your home, the price will go down to $2 per block. Now, if you are buying in bulk, that price goes from $2 all the way down to $1. And there's one more that's not included in this, and that is aggregating accounts. Right now with the city, we've got a number of different accounts that have a block of renewable energy on it, maybe 2 now, and that's still under like the $3 cost. But with the new tariff, we'll be able to aggregate those. So every meter out there that's owned by the city, or let's say owned by the utility, we can lump those together and consider those part of that aggregate. So there's even further cost savings there. And that's for, again, for cities, but also for schools like universities or schools that have multiple meters run by the, say, River Falls schools. Next slide, please. How we're going to market these when we do get the approval, and again, when that approval comes, it's kind of hard to say, but here's our plan is for those who are currently buying, and right now we're at 12%, which would put us 3rd in the nation. We are going to send out a individualized letter to them, showing them what their current usage is and what it would cost to increase for 1 block, or what it would cost to go to 100% renewable. For those that aren't purchasing, we won't do the personalized route, but we will have a letter going out to them showing the changes in the program. And then for the larger customers and our key accounts, we'll use this as an opportunity to go out and speak with them and either encourage them to participate or purchase more, or also see what we can do, what we can offer to them as utility in terms of reliability and energy efficiency program. So that's the green block tariff. And I'll go on to the line voltage smart thermostat, and I'll take questions after this. There's only one slide. This program, line voltage smart thermostat, really it's baseboard heat. You have electric baseboard heat. There currently is very few options for any kind of smart thermostat. So this one had come up through WPPI Energy. So we worked with them. Focus on Energy is participating in this, as well as American Public Power's DEED program. And DEED is their research and development wing, and they received a nice grant from that program as well. So we're working with those partners to be able to buy down these smart thermostats down to $25 per unit. And you might, if you have 5 units in your house, you would need, to control all of those, you need 5 thermostats. We're finding most people don't want to control all 5. They want to control 1 or 2 that really heat their house. And then the installation is included in this. So we're right now in the phase of purchasing, and that closes on August 20th. We will do the installs by the start of the heating season, and then it'll be 2 years worth of data collection to see the impacts on people's bills and people's lifestyles in terms of using their heat. So smart line voltage smart thermostat, that not everybody received these letters. We parceled them out and identified those with electric heat and sent letters directly to them. If you do see this, or if you've seen it show up on your Facebook account or something like that, it is probably because there's cookies out there and you click on something and then you know how it shows up on your Facebook account. So that's why you'll see these things. And the question came up, is that real? Is this legit? Our logo is on there, and yes, it is. And, so we encourage people to participate. This is a program where people are able to, they can't control the rate at what the utility bill or the utility charge, but they can control how much they use. And so this is another way that we can help people reduce their bills regardless of their house size, basically baseball heat. And that's what I got for that one. So I'm open for questions.
Mike, how much are those thermostats new? Like if you were to buy one off the shelf that our customers can get for $25?
Yeah, I think they say 139 bucks. So they're a heck of a deal.
Okay.
And we did look at a number of, I think they vetted 5 different thermostats, and this is the one that they landed on.
Any other questions for Mike on green blocks or smart thermostats?
I want to, maybe I missed something, but the 21,000 down to 10,000, I caught your tariff discussion, but I missed how we got to that big a drop. Can you just briefly cover that again?
Sure. In part because the cost of the tariff is going down from $2 to $1, but also that aggregate component where we're now, we had some $3 accounts essentially where they're buying smaller amounts. So now we're able to aggregate those. That combination of aggregate and the other price drop that's what got us to the 10,000.
Okay, thank you. I'm sure there's a little more to it, but I might look into that. I just think that's an amazing number. So.
Yep, and it's great, and that's something that we anticipated when we started the removal road call. So it's good news.
Yeah, thank you.
Yep.
Anyone else?
Moving on.
Yep. All right.
We're getting near the end, folks. So I'll right before we get to Sarah Carlson to talk about the financial update, I'll give a real brief update off the cuff here about what happened during the COVID. So we were anticipating potentially 10% decreases in electric, water, and sewer revenues due to COVID-19. Actually, I'll just start out with the good news in water and sewer. Actually, a lot of the water usage has gone up this summer, maybe because people are home and it was a drier summer. So we didn't see really much decrease at all in water revenues and conversely sewer revenues. That's good news. Electric, we did feel an impact. Our largest user, the university, was down maybe roughly 12 to 15% in our revenues from them. So we did feel that. And also the school district shutting down early also impacted our bottom line. So our largest user and the school districts in our top 5, they had an impact on electric usage. We probably were down, I think we decided $125,000 this year in some of the revenues from those 2 customers. So that's what the COVID impact was on our electric, water, and wastewater utilities. Electric, fairly significant impact. Water, sewer, not so much. Sarah, maybe I'll turn it over to you to go from there.
Thanks, Kevin.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't have, in interest of time, I don't have a ton of slides here, but I'm certainly welcome any question that the group might have once we walk through this. We put together a couple different graphs for you guys. So what this is showing here is just this aging compared to last year, and this is across all of our enterprise funds. And so what we're highlighting for you here is that we're seeing an increase in our aging buckets, and that's because of the moratorium that's issued by the PSC, so our inability to do any additional collection or late fees for delinquent accounts. So what you're seeing here is a bit of an uptick in our delinquent accounts. Wanted to show that for the group. You can turn the next slide, Lene. In terms of cash and investments, I think especially in times like this, just keeping an eye on cash is critical. And so I wanted to show you that we're still sitting really well. We're looking really good across all of our funds. You're seeing a dip in electric from where we were last year from a cash standpoint, and that's because we're using our cash on hand to pay for the South Fork transformer. But what's not included in here is we did get a great deal of being able to borrow $500,000 from WPPI at no interest for a 10-year loan. So that will be a cash infusion for the electric utility that will come in here over the next couple days. But wanted to show this slide to show the group that there's enough cash on hand to sustain our operations. You can go to the next slide, Lene. Good. Year-to-date revenue. So Kevin kind of hit the highlights on this already. We're seeing a drop, which we anticipated most drastically in our electric utility because of the reduced usage from the school district as well as the university. So that's really driving that revenue drop. When you're looking at our revenue in total, we also had a pretty significant contributed capital across all of our enterprise funds last year, which we don't have that same revenue driver this year. So that's contributing to a little bit of a drop in revenue across the board. If you want to switch to the next in terms of expenses, Lene, that'd be great. Thanks. And then you'll see a corresponding drop in our expenses, specifically for electric, because as we're selling less electricity, we're also buying less electricity. So really the net impact is roughly about $125,000 of margin for the electric utility that we have lost as a result of COVID. We're also seeing, the utility funds in total are doing fairly well. As Kevin mentioned, I do think that looking at the electric utility specifically, as we touched on this earlier, we did not budget for the expenses that were associated with the relicensing of the hydros and the FERC studies. So if you look on a year-to-date basis, the electric utility is losing almost $450,000 compared to being even, or basically break even at year-to-date last year. And a lot of that is because of the increased expenses for the hydros and the relicensing. Now, Kevin mentioned already that we did do the rate study, and we are going to implement those increased rates. So there will be a little bit of a pickup for the utility towards the back end of the year. And as Kevin mentioned, the PSC allowed or agreed to this or recommended the rate increase is effective we could have implemented as early as July, but did not feel, based on Kevin's leadership, did not feel that was appropriate to burden the ratepayers with an increase in the middle of a pandemic. So pushed it off. So the rate increase will be effective as of 9/28, but that will help offset some of the losses that we're seeing right now in the electric utility. I'm happy to take any questions that the group might have.
I don't know if this is the right question for you. I kind of feel like maybe Scott might jump in on this, but I've looked into kind of inflation in general lately since COVID started. And someone showed me an estimate for lumber, where in May, a 2x4 cost $3 and change, and today it's $6 and change. And I know inflation is not double, but I've seen reports showing it as high as 10%. And I'm just wondering, is that something we've discussed? Is that, by we, I mean you, Kevin, and other players. Is that accurate? I know it's high, but I don't know how high, and I'm not trying to be alarmist. but there's certainly economic impacts at large, and I'm just wondering if that has affected us in any way.
One place that would show up is when we go out to bid on projects, and we haven't seen that alarming high bid this year. So we had some work on Hanson Drive for water sewer that related to the jug handle project, and the bids there were not out of line. So we didn't notice that they're that bad. And I think as anecdotally, other bids we've had throughout the city for sewer lining, manhole replacements, they're in line with what we've had. So in the utility industry, we haven't seen that dramatic push to say, oh my God, I can't believe these bids are way out of line. We've been pretty much in line with kind of what we were expecting. The bids have been aggressive, and so no, we haven't noticed it that much in the utility industry.
Good to hear. Good, thanks.
Hey, Sarah, it's Kellen.
Hey there.
How's it going?
Good.
If the university and the school district needed to shut down again, what would be the impact looking down the road? I guess it looks like we have enough cash on hand and all of those fun things, but I guess, have you run numbers or started to investigate that at all and how it would play out?
I think that's a great question, and certainly we hope that that's not what happens, but we've certainly had conversations that what would that mean if that does happen, and I think we have some scenarios that shows, roughly, we know roughly what our margins are, and so we've been doing some various scenarios that looks to outline what a year end could look like, and Kevin and I are having lots of conversations around what levers we have to pull if we need to in order to try and curb some expenses. We've done a lot already, but are there any stones unturned that we can look at to help offset some of that revenue? But yeah, so year to date, so if you look at over the summer since the shutdown, we've lost roughly 125,000. So depending on how long a potential shutdown would be in the fall, we have those numbers, but hard to know. But it certainly is going to have an adverse impact on the electric utility if that happens.
Yeah, so Kellen, so in the beginning, we were making estimates. We were looking kind of like projecting what they could look like. Well, we have been tracking weekly. So we have a folder where we're tracking weekly usage for our largest users and citywide. So now we have a really good idea of what a vacant university looks like. So if this should happen again, we can extrapolate that forward and be a lot closer with our estimates, but we know it's significant. We have real data to play off of now, not just projections. Yeah, it's significant, no doubt about it. I'll say this: the university is 11% of our electric load. But as Sarah mentioned, it's less power we have to buy, but we're losing that margin.
Well, we hope we can hold out for you.
I hope so too.
I think we're all hoping, just for the sake of the community, this all is able to work well.
Yes. So students starting checking in pretty soon, Kellen? Couple weeks?
They start moving in the 26th. They move in pods, so they have assigned days. So we bring them in and they're tested as they show up on that day. They'll be regularly tested after that. So yeah, you'll start seeing them on the 26th, but not in that massive wave that you would normally see them. They'll be coming in a much smaller waves. They'll be much more controlled.
Okay. All of our fingers are crossed that people stay healthy and they get it right. And I know the university is doing everything they can to make that happen.
Yeah, I think we're watching the news and how it's going across the country as other universities open up. So Chapel Hill was not a ringing endorsement today. So we hope we do better than them.
I saw that headline too. So just to let you know real briefly before we wrap up. So through COVID, we've kept all of our employees healthy. We've took some pretty drastic actions. We separated crews. We have 3 guys here, 2 guys here, some folks housing at the power plant, both for electric and water in different pods. So we're keeping folks separated when we can, masking when they're together in trucks and when they can't social distance. Again, hand washing, all of that, but we are doing things to separate people. So in case two get it, we don't get a whole line crew or a whole water crew out at once. So that's been the goal, and I guess no one's been sick, so we've been lucky that way. Anything else for the betterment of the group? You've been a very patient group tonight. I mean, that was a fire hose of information, and a lot of stuff going on in the utility. I mean, the world has changed, but people are still building. People still want electricity, and they still want clean water, and they want to be able to flush their toilets. And those are kind of non-negotiables. We've had crews that have rolled up their sleeves and have stayed at it and have accomplished those goals. So
I had an idea for you, Kevin. I think between you and Ron, you should create a wall of shame with hypodermic needles and all that kind of stuff. That'd be kind of interesting.
I just say, Mark, toilet paper only, please.
This is a great meeting tonight. Thank you.
Well, good to catch up. So thanks for your attention, everybody. Leslie, thank you. That was very good. I mean, that was long, but people needed to hear that. And that's the information. People then the council can go back and rewatch that portion too if they want questions answered regarding studies and where we're at. So
Kevin, Lene, John, as of this moment, are we planning to have next month's meeting in this format?
Yeah, I believe so. I think the word from the city administrator is you can plan on this for definitely the remainder of 2020.
Okay.
You guys are really good at it too, by the way. Excellent job getting in. Nice work. So the next meeting should be shorter since we don't have to make up 5 months worth of information in one meeting. So, and all right. If there's nothing else, I guess that's it. Patrick, I guess. Do we adjourn? I don't know if we have to adjourn a work session.
It's a workshop. It's a workshop. So, but if you'd like, I'll call it. So, I say thanks everybody. Appreciate everything, the questions, the time, the presentations. So, and thanks for putting it together, John, Lene. Good work. We'll see you guys in a month.
All right. Thank you, everybody. Appreciate it.
Bye.
Thanks.